Welcome back to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, John Braddock, the author of Click Here When I Die and the founder of the Legacy Vault by My Life and Wishes, an online planning and document storage solution created to make things easier for those you love. So, hey, what if I told you an elderly couple married for 60 years spent their final months alive separated? Not because they didn't love each other, not because they didn't want to live together, but because of things like documents. Or, hey, what if I told you you could lose a portion of your inheritance to siblings that you didn't even know existed? Well, today's episode, folks, is not theory. It is not legal jargon. It's real life stuff. And it's why planning is not about just the paperwork, it's about protection. So today I'm joined by someone who doesn't just practice estate planning, she lives its mission. Attorney Karnina, Nina Deane, is the founder and principal attorney of Deane Law, serving clients throughout the great state of Louisiana. She calls herself your legacy building advocate. And frankly, I really love that language. She focuses on estate planning, asset protection, business law, and she's especially passionate about educating millennials and first generation wealth builders. But what really drives her, she lost her mother, her single mother, when she was 6 years old, and there was no estate plan in place. Hey, Nina, my friend, welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. We've known each other for a while, and I know you've got some great stories, and I think our audience is really going to take notice, as I did when we started talking. But as I always like to do, I always like to get down to the why because there's so many different areas of law, right? There's corporate law, there's business law, you've got personal injury law, family law, and these things. But you focus on estate planning and legacies and helping individuals and businesses with that. Can you tell us about your why?
Yes. So, like you said in the introduction, my desire to help families stems from my experience of a failed estate plan. So, when I was 6, my single mother left this earth and she was in the military. So, she always told her mom, my grandmother, that if anything happened to her, she had a life insurance policy, $250,000, and I would be the beneficiary. So, if something happened, she had that in place for me. Unfortunately for me, she was scheduled to re-enlist in the military that upcoming week, and she passed away the weekend before. And
Oh,
so, had it been just a few more days, there would have been assets in place for me. But that wasn't the case. And just being authentic and vulnerable, I like to give a little bit more detail of her passing. She was actually killed by her jealous boyfriend. Like you said, my first name is Karnina. So she got that when she was overseas in North Korea. So she liked to travel, and things like that. And so he felt that if she re-enlisted, she would go overseas again and leave him. And so he killed her for that. And at 6, my mom's mom had to explain that to me. And the first question that I asked is, well, who's going to punish him? Who's going to put him in jail for hurting mom? And my grandmother said, the lawyers. So at 6 years old, I told my family that I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to put him in jail myself. And so that's really the lemons to lemonade story. And one thing that really stuck with me that I didn't realize until I was older is that many people don't have a village, right? Luckily for me, my mom's parents and her siblings stood up and took care of me. And so, I didn't have to go to foster care, but it could have been foster care. The streets are even worse. And because people typically may not have that village, that's the importance of having the planning. So I did what I said I would do. I went to college, I got my master's in business. I graduated law school and with honors, passed the bar the first time, and I started working for an insurance defense firm. And so with insurance defense, it's personal injury, but we're representing the insurance company and the businesses, right? And so there, our job was to look at a plaintiff's claims and to see if there was any weak spot, anything that we could, target to be able to reduce our liability for the client or, even zero out the verdict. And so using that experience as a insurance defense litigator, that's how I look at building my estate plans. So I want to make sure that it's secure. I want to make sure that it's going to work when you need it to work. And so that is a little bit what makes me a little different from traditional estate plan attorneys coming from, litigation, moving into more transactional, what I like to say is personal family lawyer, position.
Yeah, absolutely. So, wow, what a story. So, first and foremost, I hope the lawyers put him in jail.
Actually, as far as we know, he was never arrested. There was never enough evidence. And last that we knew that he was still walking around a free man in Texas.
Oh man, that's got to be hard to live with because uh, I'm kind of a protector, right? And Michelle and I have 6 children together, and it's always been, if someone ever hurt, one of my babies, anyone ever hurt my wife, I'd scour the earth until I track them down. But
Right.
but you,
Well, everything happens for a reason. And so I said that, for me to focus on educating people with my story so that way we can try to prevent that from happening in the future.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Wow. So yeah, it makes sense. You're trying to help people, protect people. I like the fact that you spent time, working for the big guy, trying to keep their money because they don't want to pass it down.
Dark fact.
Right? Didn't want to hand it down to the average people, and so what's going on there, and you know how to find those things that someone might try to pick apart at some point in time and prevent that. So
Absolutely.
that's beautiful. Um, all right. So the takeaway for me in that little bit is, when you say estate planning isn't paperwork, it's more about peace of mind. And that's because that's lived experience that you've had. And it really resonates. So before we started recording, you shared something with me. Honestly, it stopped me in my tracks. So you tell me about this elderly couple married for 60 years, and then COVID hits. And because of documents missing or lost or never created, they never saw each other again. Can you just share that story? Walk us through that?
Absolutely. So this elderly couple, they lived in a small town in Louisiana. They were in their 80s, had been married for about 60 years. They had one child, a girl. She was an adult. She was in her 40s, 50s. Um, and she lived in another state. So the situation was the guy came to the firm that I was working with at the time, not my firm here. And so he needed help with getting an interdiction, right? So that's what we call in Louisiana. In other states, common law states, it's the curatorship or guardianship proceedings, right? Conservatorship. And so, just to give you a little background, so they're living together in the small town in Louisiana. They've been together over a decade. I'm sorry, over half a century. And so they know each other. They have their systems and everything. Mrs. and I'll call them Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith had a little bit of dementia going on, but because they had their system, everything worked fine. 2020 hit, COVID happened. Mr. Smith caught COVID. And it was really bad where he had to be hospitalized for maybe about 3 months. So when he became hospitalized, the daughter came from where she was living, came down to get her mom because Mrs. Smith can't live in the house by herself. She has a little bit of dementia. So Mr. Smith was doing a lot of the leading and things like that. So while Mr. Smith's in the hospital, Mrs. Smith goes back with her daughter. Okay. And the daughter, she has her family. She's married, children, she's working a full-time job. So dealing with mom was a lot, right? And so she made the decision to put mom in a nursing home. Okay. And so, mom's there. She doesn't really want to be there. She wants to go home, things like that. Luckily, Mr. Smith, he recovered. He was released from the hospital, full bill of health, everything's fine. He goes home, he calls his daughter and says, "Hey, I'm back home, bring your mama back." And she says, no. She says, no, mama's staying at the nursing home. And so Mr. Smith had one of his relatives drive him to the other state where Mrs. Smith's in the nursing home, right? He goes there, he says, "Hey, I'm the husband. That's my wife. I want her to go home." Mrs. Smith saying she's want to go home. And so the nursing administration talked to him and they said, well, the person that signed her in needs to sign a release. That's not going to happen because daughter said she's not signing anything for mom to leave there. Then the nursing administration, they said, well, do you have power of attorney? And he was like, well, I'm next of kin. I'm her husband. I don't need that. And because they didn't have that in place, there was no technical agent, right? And now that Mrs. Smith has dementia, she doesn't have the mental capacity to give him power of attorney. So that's not an option. So then the administration tells him, well, you need to get a court order saying that you're her guardian and that we can release her into your care because they have liability concerns and things like that, right? And so that's when Mr. Smith came back to Louisiana and hired the firm I was working with at the time. So I was one of the attorneys on the case. And so, that's what we did. We filed the pleadings in the court to try to get him designated as guardian of Mrs. Smith. Now, the whole time, while Mrs. Smith's in the nursing home, that's not cheap. That's $5,000, $6,000 a month. Guess whose account it was coming out of? Mr. and Mrs. Smith's joint account, not the daughter's account. So they don't even want her there and they're footing the bill. And so, when you do anything in the court process, you have the time delays. File the pleadings, serve the person. They have to have time to respond. Look at the court's calendar, to pick a date, serve everyone to make sure everyone has notice, all that stuff. So all that is going on. But at the same time, we're talking to daughter. And we're saying, hey, they've been together over 50 years, they're old, they just want to be near each other. So before we're even able to get a court date, daughter agrees to allow mom to transfer to a nursing home in Louisiana. That's not far from the house where, Mr. Smith lives. So that way Mr. Smith can visit her every day. Okay. And so while we're working out that paperwork and all that stuff, Mr. Smith gets sick again. And this time he dies. And so this time span was about 3 months, not even 100 days from him getting out of the hospital to when he passed away. So daughter has to come down, deal with the arrangements for Mr. Smith's funeral and things like that. She leaves mom in nursing home and out of state. And at the funeral, daughter gets a call from the nursing home saying that mom passed away. And so I tell my clients this story because it is a good example of how everything is not black and white. When we talk about next of kin, it just says, okay, well, sure, it will be the husband. But what if the husband is sickly? What if he's not available? Then the daughter would have been next of kin. Who would the judge have chosen to be guardian? The elderly husband that, needs help moving around, or the daughter that lives a state away that's too busy living her life? So, we never got to hear that from the judge because we never got that far. But had they had the proper planning in place, Mr. Smith would have been able to take Mrs. Smith back home, and they lived out their last 100 days together, you know. And so it's just the importance of understanding that everything's not black and white. In law, when you ask a lawyer a question, they usually tell you maybe because it just depends. And so this is one of the stories that I like to tell clients to show the significance of that.
Wow. And so with a little planning, they would have had, power of attorney, durable power of attorney, right? And problem solved, right?
Absolutely.
But I think, you know, let me ask you this question. I mean, how many couples do you think assume marriage just automatically gives them that authority,
98%.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Until it doesn't.
Until it doesn't, right. I can just tell you a quick story too with this. I had a husband call me like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Wife had a seizure, unconscious in ICU. They had separate bank accounts. And so some of the, bills came out of her bank account, but his name wasn't on it. And so that's when he realized, oh, I need to have something in place. And, it was a big hassle. But luckily she woke up and she was conscious and everything like that. So I was able to go to the hospital to do that power of attorney, to put that in place right then and there. And so, we were able to alleviate that issue, but had she not woken up, he would have had to go to court.
It's so important just to, and and like I said, I think far too many people do. They think, okay, well, he's my husband or she's my wife, and they'll just do everything. But yeah, eventually, but there's going to be legal proceedings. It takes time, like you say, to get on a court docket. It takes time, um,
Money.
and money, and many times, time is the one thing that you don't have on your
Mhm.
side.
Right.
Wow. So if someone is listening today, right now, you're married, you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s. Okay. What do they absolutely need in place, Nina, so the government doesn't step in?
They need to do disability planning. So that's planning if you're still alive, but you're not able to care for yourself the way that you need to care for yourself. And so in disability planning, you have the general or financial power of attorney, and you have healthcare power of attorney, and even going as far as an advanced healthcare directive for end of life care decisions, at the very least.
Uh, so to summarize, this isn't about totally about death planning. This is about incapacity planning, people. People don't plan for dying. They fail to plan for living through the unexpected things that happen.
Right. Even if it's temporary, such as, you're in an accident, your legs broke, you can't move for a couple of weeks, or it could be permanent dementia. And so that's what I educate my clients on is comprehensive estate planning is twofold. Everyone knows the death planning, but everyone forgets about the disability planning or incapacity. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was talking to a guest on a podcast released near last week or earlier this week, but we were, talking about that, you know, most of us aren't fortunate just to die. We slowly fade away, right? And it's in that fading away part where we might not be capable of taking care of ourselves. We may not have a mental capacity. And that incapacity planning is so, so critical so that someone, your spouse, your significant other, your life partner, that individual can be your voice when you don't have a voice.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Hey, the second, so I want to transition because I like thriller, right? So the second story you shared is almost like a legal thriller. So you were telling me about a woman that thinks she's like the only sibling, and she starts probate and then uncovers she's got several others. Can you fill us in on this story?
Yes. So a lady came to my office. Her sister, her only sister, had passed away. So it was their parents, and they had two children. And so in Louisiana, when you don't have any children, you're not married, it's your separate property, the next to inherit will be your parents and siblings, right? So parents had already passed. So, based on the information that we had, surviving sister would inherit everything. So the house, the car, the bank accounts, everything, right? Well, of course, as an attorney in my due diligence, I'm going to pull the parents' successions, or that's what we call in Louisiana, successions. It's the same thing as probate. And so I'll pull those pleadings to see, what's there. And in those pleadings, it says that dad was married before and had five other kids in that previous marriage. So then I'm calling my client saying, hey, I thought you said that your dad only had two kids. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, he was married before. And she was like, oh, yeah, that was like 40 years ago. We don't know those people, they don't count. And so, because the deceased sister didn't have a will or a trust in place, Louisiana law is going to apply. And Louisiana law says parents and siblings. It doesn't say full-blooded siblings, it says siblings. So half siblings count. So the five individuals that they never had a relationship with whatsoever ended up inheriting a major portion of those assets. And so, the client, she was visibly upset, but she understood what the law said, but she just knew that her sister was turning over in her grave to know that the things that she worked hard for was going to people that they didn't even have a relationship with, and it doesn't, the law doesn't say, oh, the siblings that you're close with or the loved ones that, you have a good relationship with, you know, if you're biologically or legally adopted related, then they get to inherit,
Wow.
unfortunately.
And maybe for another day, we'll come back on because for our listeners, in Louisiana, uh, estates are handled differently than pretty much in every other state.
Mhm.
It it's like the Napoleonic rule or something. Is it
Yes,
called, Nina?
yes.
Yeah, and that's that comes back from Europe and France and
France. Hmm.
that came over, and so that's where things differ quite a lot. So how common are in your area that you've seen blended families that have like unknown heirs?
It happens all the time
Yeah.
because they assume that it's going to be my loved ones that I'm close with for some reason. Even spouses, they automatically assume that their spouse is going to inherit. But Louisiana favors children over spouses. So your child inherits before your spouse does.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. And legal documents will prevent these things.
Correct. Right.
Oh man. If yeah, it's important. I don't care what state you live in, everybody needs to have some form of estate plan. But for all you listening down Louisiana, if you don't have a plan, get after it
You have a
because
problem.
yeah, because and I don't care really what state you're in, but specifically here, the state really doesn't care about your feelings. It has to follow their statute.
Correct.
Wow. But if a sister simply had a will,
Mhm.
would this have been totally different?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the thing about a will. If you don't have a will, the state will write your will for you.
Mhm. I always tell clients that even if they haven't created a plan themselves, the state has one for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And most of us, with all due respect to the government, we really don't want the government all up in our business, especially after we're gone, right?
right.
So let, let's make the decisions ourselves. Um, so you focus a lot on millennials and first generation wealth builders. Why is that in that audience so important right now?
Well, it's something that I can relate to, and I like to make like my one of my taglines is making estate planning real, so relatable, easy to understand, accessible, and legacy building. And so, to get this generation, because I'm a millennial, to get them on board, because the other generations, they're at that age, they're, 50s and over, so they already know the importance. And generally, younger individuals don't think about that. I have time, but you never decide. Like I always give the example of my mom. My mom didn't think that she was going to die at 29. She thought she had more time too. And you just never know. And the only two things that are guaranteed are death and taxes. So we need to prepare. We need to prepare for both, right?
Right.
And so
And
it's just
and
trying.
some people don't pay their taxes, but the death part's still going to happen.
Right. Right, right. So yeah, so just trying to be proactive with the younger generations, to put planning in place because it's just so important. If you're over the age of 18, you need some type of planning in place.
Oh, absolutely. As we talk about frequently, when your kids turn 18, they go off to college or wherever. Well, yeah, it's still your child. They aren't adults.
Mhm.
And if God forbid something happens to them and you need to talk to a medical professional or anything like that, without documents in place, they're not going to talk to you, and it
Absolutely.
creates all kinds of challenges. Wow. Yeah, I think millennials really need to take notice. I remember back, when I was in my 20s and I was immortal. Found out though that some of my friends who were in their 20s weren't
Mhm.
immortal.
Right.
They didn't make it to 30.
Mhm.
As I always say, death is not just for old people. It happens every day. It's unexpected. And then, a lot of millennials might think, well, I don't have an estate. And as I always say, estate's a fancy word for stuff. And you do have stuff.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Cool. All right. So this is the lightning round. All right, a couple of quick questions. What's the biggest estate planning myth that you hear?
The biggest one would be that, well, it will be twofold. So the first is what we kind of talked about already, that, if I'm married, everything goes to my spouse. It depends what state you're in, because in Louisiana, that's not true. The second one would be that if you have a will, it avoids probate successions, which is not true. And I like to explain to my clients that the will is an instruction manual to the court, to the probate successions court, of who you want to inherit. So, although you get to override basic state law with, who you want to inherit your items, you still have to go through the probate succession process.
So what that means is if you just have a will, you don't have a trust, but just a will, and your intent is to make sure that your heirs get these things upon your death, they will, but it might not be for a couple of years.
Possibly, depending on the state. Louisiana is not so um, long with the probate process unless, heirs don't get along. Because I have a succession that's been going on for about 6 years now. Yeah, generally most of them are relatively short, 3, 6 months, something like that. It's not unless we have, people not getting along, that we have it where it goes for multiple years. So,
Yeah, yeah. I was speaking with a uh, uh, attorney up in the greater New York City area, and she was telling me that, and this was about a year ago when she was on my show. She was telling me at that time, in King County. It's taking almost 2 years to get on
Mhm.
the docket.
Right.
So that's going to last a minute or two.
Right.
All right. So you address this. Age someone should create a plan. 18, right?
18. Right. And you can always have something basic and build upon it.
Right. What are the most important things that anyone who is 18 or older should absolutely have?
I would say a financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, or a HIPAA if you want your parents to be able to talk to the doctors, and then just a basic last will and testament. So that way you can say who you want to inherit your stuff.
Awesome. All right. One sentence, fill in the blank. Estate planning is,
Estate planning is um, well, I'm not gonna follow along with that. I'll change it a little bit. I don't like to just state estate planning because when people hear estate planning, they think documents, right? But if you put documents in place today, it's not going to work for you in 10 years when your life is different. And so, what I like to call it is legacy building because you're leaving more than just documents and money. You know, you can leave the human and the spiritual assets to your loved ones, the guide, having the plan in place to have that peace of mind. So,
yeah, I like it. Estate planning is legacy building. Estate
mhm,
planning is essential. Estate planning is love.
love, absolutely.
There we go. I love that. That's awesome. So, look, for our listeners, if you're out there listening, you're thinking, I'll get this later. I don't think so. Later never happens. Someday may never happen. So, planning isn't about expecting tragedy. In my opinion, it's about protecting love.
Mhm.
Right? And
Leaving a legacy of love.
yeah, absolutely. It is. I look at it as having a good plan is probably the greatest final gift that I can leave my family because it avoids chaos, confusion, added stress, family divisiveness, uh, courts, time, money, all those things. And the last thing I think anyone wants to do is when they die, family's still going to be sad and grieve. That's part of the healing process, right? But all those other emotions are unnecessary. And so you really ask yourself a question: what do I want the experience to be like for my family after I'm gone?
Mhm.
Right? For the three of you listening who say, I don't care, they'll figure it out. All right, fine. But everyone else, make a plan.
Well, and we can do another session talking about the horror stories of people believing that, oh, my children are grown, they're going to figure it out, and
Oh,
all the chaos and conflict and confusion and the, hundreds of thousands of dollars lost in the estate.
absolutely. I mean, seriously, I mean, everyone with kids, I mean, your kids ever fight? Don't tell me no, they do, you know, and they can't agree on things. I mean, our kids couldn't agree on what to have for dinner. They couldn't agree on what movie we're going to go watch.
Mhm.
And if I mistakenly think that when I die and there's stuff involved that they're going to agree, that ain't going to happen, folks. uh, Nina, this has been awesome. Thank you for turning your pain and your story into purpose and helping families build real legacies.
No problem. I'm happy to be here. I actually am building up a social media channel, just educating the public on, legacy building, things like that. So you can find me at Your Legacy Building Advocate. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube.
Awesome. That's great. And then what I will do, everyone, you will be able to find Nina's contact information in the show notes below. We'll have the social media accounts there, linked to her website, and a phone number to her office. If you have any questions, she's, as you can tell, an awesome human being. And I'm sure she'd be very happy to speak with you. So, if this episode hit you, share it, send it to your parents, send it to your spouse, send it to your siblings, even the ones you haven't talked to in a while. Because the cost of planning is small. The cost of not planning, well, you just heard the stories. And as always, my friends, remember, your life is your legacy. So plan ahead and make it a great day.